Welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Abbie Richie. I am the CEO and founder of Senior Savvy, and you can find me right here every Tuesday talking with people who are engaged in senior living and the technology that impacts your community and your resident. Before I invite my guest on, let's go ahead and run our intro. Welcome back to Tech Tuesday. I want to go ahead and invite Brett Landrum of Procare HR as our guest today. Welcome back to Tech Tuesday, Brett.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. You know, I started to notice a term around some posts I saw on your site, and that term is HRIS. And I'm curious about that because that technology directly impacts senior living communities. Could you please tell us first what Procare HR does, and second about the HRIS?
Yeah, so Procare HR, we're an HR managed services company, offer comprehensive HR services to senior care providers, everything from HR technology to plugging in the people, the products, et cetera, really all with a vision of being able to leverage HR to drive better quality, resident satisfaction, and financial outcomes for our operators.
Yeah, tell us about the HR climate these days, because I know HR professionals are stressed. They have to do more with less and keep everyone happy. How close to reality is that?
I think that's a very accurate statement. I mean, the HR climate in senior care is really interesting right now. It's coming out of COVID, and there's still a lot of headwinds with labor and technology. Operators really trying to get a handle on staffing and how to best control their labor expense. I think in general, the way I always describe it is that senior living has a really, really challenging HR job, and that they have more transactions and volume and challenges than a lot of other industries, but often with less resources, both financially and kind of I would say whether it's intellectual property or technology, et cetera, with which to address those that increased volume and challenges. And so it's a really tough HR environment right now. I think there's a little bit of easing on the staffing side that's allowing organizations to get better at the labor, at controlling labor expense. But the other side of the world that there's a lot of focus on now, given the workforce shortage, and I think a broader recognition of the role HR can play in our broader organizational mission and vision, which is typically related to quality of care, financial outcomes, resident satisfaction. I think the industry as a whole is starting to realize, hey, we've got to think about HR differently. That yes, there's the transactional stuff that we've got to do really well, like payroll and benefits and HR technology and data and work comp, all that stuff. But there's this engagement people thing that we as an industry haven't really figured out, particularly for our frontline workforce. But when we don't do it well, it can have adverse impacts on the organization and the mission. And when we do it well, conversely, it can have some really positive impacts on the residents and ultimately the business outcomes for the organization.
Yeah, it's so dynamic and multi-layered, especially with the 24/7 aspect of senior living communities, right? So let me ask you about the HRIS and how this solves some of those challenges.
Yes, so HR, a lot of different acronyms for really the same thing, but HRIS is Human Resource Information System. People talk about them as HCM, Human Capital Management, or HCMS, Human Capital Management System. Lots of different acronyms. They're all saying the same thing. And really, the concept is to have one system that's a system of record. Oftentimes, payroll's out of it. applicant tracking and talent acquisition. There's typically employee self-service embedded in there, time and attendance, scheduling, benefits administration. And really, I would say you're starting to see more and more organizations transition to these platforms. I think really in the last probably 8 to 10 years, you've seen this HCM or HR technology space advance really, really rapidly. You're seeing a lot more adoption, both in senior living and just organizations broadly, really with the goal of driving efficiency, putting controls in place, eliminating manual work, duplication of effort, et cetera.
So with so many options available, what would you say to an operator trying to choose one or many solutions? What many specialty products? What would be the solution for an operator?
So the first place I would start is really getting a really firm grasp of the areas that you need specialty products. So more often than not, all these big payroll companies have got really strong HR systems attached to them. So, Paycom and Paylocity and UKG, ADP, they've all, they've got the payroll engine side of the world, but they also have built on all these other modules. And I think where you can, it's best to have, one system in place. That said, there's a significant opportunity to figure out where are the areas in the business where we get significant leverage if we plug in highly specialized value additive products to solve a really specific problem. Because all these big payroll companies and this great technology, it has to meet the needs of lots of different industries. And so particularly when it's like high volume recruiting for our frontline workforce and/or scheduling, senior living, as you are well aware, has an incredibly complex scheduling environment. Those are two areas where we've seen organizations have a lot of success opting to go outside of the one system to rule them all, so, for lack of a better phrase, mentality, and say, all right, we're going to have one system for our payroll, our app, maybe our onboarding, HR files and licensing and training, succession planning, performance management, benefits, all that stuff. However, we're going to go bolt on a scheduler or a potential, an applicant tracker, really in order, with the goal in mind of driving really fantastic and best in class results in those areas.
Got it. What specific challenges does senior living face when they're adopting an HRIS?
Multi-layered question. I think number one, we often don't involve enough of the right stakeholders. So one of the things that we've seen is at either an executive level or at, really from an HR perspective, we think about what we need. But yes, the HR team needs to use the system to perform a lot of their tasks and be efficient and get good data. But really, the users of the system, the vast majority of the users of the system are on the front lines. It's your executive directors, it's your business office managers, it's your supervisors. And those are the folks that we really need to think about. How do they need to use the system? What's the information they need to get out of it every day? What's the data that equips them to better do their job and drive business results? And I think oftentimes we don't involve those stakeholders when we're evaluating different systems and/or configuring it. Like, there's a lot of these systems, they're all really fantastic, but if we build it really from a kind of a siloed HR approach, we're not going to build the work streams and the workflows and configure it in a way that really maximizes the use across the organization. And then frankly, when that happens, the data and the efficiency of the HR team isn't as strong either, because you're constantly policing and trying to fill in the gaps because the system isn't being used well.
I hear this all the time, whether it's a resident engagement platform or it's a POS or whatever the case is, that if the stakeholders have not been involved in the choosing, then there comes to be this type of dissonance, right? And the issues that continue on. So it's so important to get all the stakeholders in one place when you're choosing something like this.
Well, and there's so many features and functionality and possible configurations of these systems. The analogy I always use when we're talking to operators is, look, like the system is the Legos, but nothing's been built. And our job, or a different HR technology company's role, is to understand the needs of the organization and build whatever Lego tower you're needing to build. And
are you a master builder, Brett? Is that what you're telling us here today? You're a master.
Fortunately, I'm not. I'm not, but my business partner is
okay.
and his team.
Okay.
All right. A group of very smart people that are much better qualified than me to be playing with the Legos.
Okay. Playing with them and stepping on them are two different things. Yeah. So I just want to put that out there. That's I'm right. Not a master builder. I got one of those in my house too. So I get it entirely. Let's talk about the compliance and the regulatory requirements. How do communities stay up to date with those?
Often what we're seeing, a couple of different platforms. There's the clinical regulatory requirements, which my personal bias is towards education systems, whether that's Educare here in Minnesota, or Relias, or some of these different technology enabled education companies. They're highly efficient typically in being able to understand a particular state's regulatory needs and building out the training modules, et cetera. So there's that side of it, which I think that those are technology platforms that are widely adopted and highly effective, at least from a clinical perspective. I think there's sometimes some stuff to be admired on some of them as it relates to more in-depth job training, but I think as a whole, that industry is getting better at supporting senior care and kind of specific job training functions. And then there's the HR regulatory side of the world, which the HR technology isn't in and of itself going to drive, isn't going to make an organization compliant, but the manner in which you configure and use the system, I think, can help drive and provide the tools for an HR function to be compliant. So, as an example, we often hear that, in senior care, we're moving so fast. We have lots of challenges as it relates to staffing. And so leaders are trying lots of different things as it relates to wages. And, we might be, offering a new hire, this particular wage that maybe isn't aligned with what we're paying everybody else, or isn't aligned with a union contract or something like that. And you can use the HR system controls in place to say, look, like a supervisor can go in and make a pay rate change, but that pay rate change needs to be approved by somebody who has the broader scope of the organization and compliance in mind, as an example. So HR technology, I don't think in and of itself is going to just transform an organization and make them compliant, but I think it's a very effective tool in helping to tighten up and drive a more compliant HR function.
Yeah. When it comes to the use of AI, how is that factoring into data, for instance?
Good question. I have had a lot of time thinking about that as of late. I think it's really in its infancy right now. I mean, I've talked to a lot of senior living operators about it, and I think a lot of folks are starting to tinker around with different AI tools and look at how do we extract the data from the HR systems and get it into the AI tool to give us, various insights. We're starting to experiment with that, particularly on the labor side of the world. And today we do, as an example, for Procare, we do a lot of work with our customers, helping them better manage their labor expense. And today we have really great data and visibility in order to give our team, the insights to really dig in and figure out what levers to pull. But it still requires our team to dig in and figure out, on X frequent basis, what levers need to be pulled. Whereas, our hope being able to leverage AI would be we can dump that data into the whatever the particular AI tool we select is, and it can tell us in more real time fashion what are the levers we need to be pulling. It can go to a level of depth, more frequently and more rapidly than what a human person can, sifting through lots of different data sets.
Gotcha. And when it comes to senior living, what things should you be looking for in order to customize the system for your community?
Yeah. So the risk of soapboxing a little bit here, what we really talk about is configuration versus customization. So there's a lot of organizations that will say, look, we really want to customize a system to meet our needs. And I would argue, because I've been down that road, I would argue you don't want to customize a system, because the way that the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure of these systems is built is one-offs are a bad thing. Building just a feature for Procare, as an example, means that it's not going to be probably upkept well. It's not going to be supported well as they roll out new other features. It's going to be harder to figure out how the different modules talk and work together. So really, what we want to look for when we're purchasing or acquiring HR technology is a highly configurable platform. Again, you think about the Legos. You want all the Lego pieces available to you, possible, and then we get to configure what we want it to look like. But we're not having to go create a random Lego, ask a company to create a random Lego piece that doesn't fit with everything else, because at some point that random Lego piece is going to cause problems and likely, kind of kinks in the process and the workflows of how all the modules talk and can come together.
What are some specific customization options that are recommended and requested?
I think the most, it's all over the place, but I think the most valuable ones are related to workflow controls. Let's all say basics is around payroll. So how we should do shift differentials and things like that. That's a necessary, a necessary function to run our business, compensate employees, pay employees, actually all that stuff. That's pretty common. But how we configure the system so that the right leaders and the right seats can view the data that matters to them, I think is a really important one. And then putting controls in place that drive the outcomes we want. So my example about the pay rate, we see it all the time where an organization, a particular community leader is really struggling, and they start raising employees' wages, or they start offering new hires in different wages or higher wages. And then our existing long tenured employees find out and they're really frustrated. And that supervisor has no ill intent. They're running 100 miles an hour, doing their best to fill census and provide great quality of care and make sure residents are satisfied and get employees in and keep employees happy. And I'm under the gun. I'm just going to go do it. Maybe without that broader take a step back and
I get it. I'm a business owner too, and there are times you have to make these decisions on the fly, right?
Yeah, but I think that's where those systems having some ability to configure those controls to say, okay, if X, then Y, before Z. So if a supervisor gives a pay rate change, not suggesting this is a great idea, but if a supervisor gives not any pay rate change, but a pay rate change over 4%, or over our particular job grade, that's 4% more, it's going to go to somebody for approval, and then it has to be approved by that person for that pay rate to be effective, as an example. Those are controls that we can configure and workflows that we can configure to drive some of the consistency and outcomes that we're looking for.
Yeah, there's so much to take in mind, but is it much different when it comes to senior care or just the care industry? What are the differences there?
We're about 80% senior care, 20% disability services. I would say there's certainly a lot of nuances specific to senior care, but like I think if you look at our disability services or clients that we support and our senior care clients, a lot of their challenges, a lot of their needs are very similar. Slight tweaks at the margin for how we do shift diffs or things like that, but a lot of the workflow and controls and data, the data needs it's all the same. They're all looking at the same stuff. They're all struggling with the same thing. It's staffing, it's turnover, it's how do we keep our great employees. How do we really get a real-time understanding of our labor and staffing needs? How do we drive those needs in a way that's cost effective but still provides high quality of care? Everybody's dealing with the same stuff. I can't speak super intelligently about the acute world and whether it translates when you get into hospitals. I suspect it probably does, but there's certainly a lot of parallels in the senior care and at least disability services world.
If you're looking into the HR crystal ball in terms of technology innovations, what would you love to see happen?
I think there's a lot of organizations right now. The industry, the HR technology industry as a whole, has done a really good job of putting data in front of people. We have to use the systems appropriately and consistently across the organization so that data tells accurate and consistent stories. We have to make sure our teams are using the systems, otherwise there's no data to tell stories. But one of the things that we've been really looking at, thinking about, and is an initiative for Procare, and I think needs to be for the industry, is leveraging tools that can tell us the story about the data and give us different perspectives of the information in the scorecards. Like there's obvious things that people can take actions on. As an example, like, hey, our scheduled overtime, we currently are looking at the next 2 weeks and 20% of our schedule has been scheduled in overtime. Okay, great. That's an actionable piece of data that somebody can go dig into. But what would be really fantastic is if, whether it's AI or, some other system could tell us, this is specifically why we have 20% of our shifts that are already scheduled into overtime. It's because Bob picked up 20 shifts of overtime and he's already worked a bunch. This person had this thing, that, like, I think there's a couple of layers deeper we can go to tell a more compelling story about what actions and levers we need to take and levers we need to pull to drive those better outcomes. And I don't see a lot of organizations, whether it be senior living operators or technology companies, us included, who are really doing that at all, but certainly none that are doing it like fantastically well.
Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of data, but can you tell a story from it? And can you apply that to the way your community is being managed? I get it. I hear this happening all the time. And the more data that can be interpreted and utilized, the more valuable it is, right?
Yeah. And it's looking at these, there's so much data out there that, there's like what's the thing and what are the handful of reasons driving the thing. And what we're getting to today is this, it's overtime as a percentage of payroll or scheduled shifts or overstaffing or whatever, but we're not getting to that, couple layers deeper of really peeling back the onion in a way that tells the story that's in a fashion that's actionable. And I think that's where the industry needs to go to fully realize the benefits of HR technology, scheduling, et cetera.
Now, you guys have a migration guide. And so if there's a senior living community that's thinking about migrating to an HRIS, how does your guide help them?
Our guide is going to walk through some of the questions that I talked about, which is how do different people need to use the system? What are the questions to think about? Whether, maybe you're migrating to a system from nothing, or maybe you're migrating from one system to the other.
Mhm.
And, the guide is intended not to be holistic and comprehensive, but at least be an organized starting point that folks can leverage to help get them thinking around what are the types of questions we should be asking, who are the stakeholders we should be involving, like how do we get a 360-degree look at our needs. And that's I think often that's where we fall short, is we've got this slice of the pie, but we haven't, or this portion of the picture, but we haven't really stepped back and taken the whole, the totality of the needs into consideration.
Can we go ahead and put that link back up for the guide, please? And Brett, while we're queuing that up, is there anything more that you want to say in regards to Procare and an HRIS?
There's a lot of there's a lot of really fantastic options out there. Procare specifically, we're a partner, so we go find best in class technology. We're really providing the services to help implement, deploy it, and make sure an organization understands their needs. For us specifically, we're not just an HR technology and payroll provider. That's not our goal, or it doesn't align with our vision very well. But we have a wealth of knowledge in our organization, and we have 70% of our company comes from senior care, and they've got a real passion for serving it. And so, I would say that we as an organization have a lot of really great intellectual capital that we would love to, provide and help the industry, regardless of whether we're the right fit. I think we can provide some of that thought partnership to help folks really think through what steps they need to take and what considerations need to be top of mind as they're contemplating a move like this.
Absolutely. And Brett, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they have more questions?
Our website, you can go on and submit a form, and somebody will call you back. I think we're generally pretty good about same day callbacks. So if somebody does have questions, happy to be a resource or a thought partner as folks are contemplating a move like this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it sounds like such a comprehensive service that you're providing. Thank you. Thank you for helping the senior living care industry. And we want to thank those folks who joined us today in the chat or later on. You can always catch a copy of this as it is being broadcasted and check it all out in its whole form later today. And Brett, thank you for joining us today. And we will see all of you back here next week.